Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about three developments that are shaping global headlines: Donald Trump's vow to retake Bagram Airbase in Afghanistan, his recent remarks about the United Nations, and the growing risk of a U.S. government shutdown. Let us begin with Bagram Airbase. Bagram, as many of you know, was once the nerve center of U.S. and NATO military operations in Afghanistan. For nearly 2 decades, it served as the main hub for air operations, intelligence gathering, and supply lines during the Long War. When the United States withdrew its forces in 2021, Bagram was left behind and soon came under the control of the Taliban. Now, Donald Trump, who remains a dominant figure in American politics, has openly declared that the U.S. should reclaim Bagram. Trump argues that Bagram is not just a leftover military facility. He calls it a strategic asset, pointing out its location near regions of China where he alleges sensitive nuclear activities may be taking place. In his view, regaining Bagram is essential to keeping U.S. rivals in check and to maintaining American influence in Central Asia. But this raises serious questions. Would the Taliban ever agree to hand it back? Afghan officials have already said their country's sovereignty is non negotiable. For them, the U.S. withdrawal was meant to end 2 decades of foreign occupation, not to invite a second round. If Trump were to push forward, would this mean renewed U.S. military action? How would regional powers such as Pakistan, Russia, or China respond? These are not small considerations. Attempting to retake Bagram could ignite a new era of tension and instability across South and Central Asia. Now let's turn to the United Nations. Trump has long been a critic of the UN, and he has once again sharpened his attacks. He claims the UN needs to get its act together, arguing that the United States shoulders an unfair share of the financial burden, while many other nations contribute too little. He also complains that too many conflicts around the world end up becoming American problems to solve, while the UN, in his view, fails to take decisive action. Supporters of the UN respond that U.S. participation has historically been critical to global peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and the enforcement of international norms. They warn that if Washington pulls back, whether by reducing funding or disengaging from key programs, the effects would ripple across humanitarian missions and global security efforts. Here again, Trump's comments highlight his America First approach, a belief that the United States should limit international commitments unless they directly serve U.S. interests. Whether you agree or disagree, the implications are global. A weakened or sidelined UN could make it harder to coordinate action on issues like climate change, refugee crisis, or nuclear proliferation. And then there is the looming US government shutdown. Each year, Congress must pass legislation to keep federal agencies funded. If lawmakers cannot agree by the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, the government partially shuts down. Right now, the standoff is intense. Trump and Republican leaders are pushing for what they call a clean continuing resolution. That means a simple stopgap bill to keep the government funded until November without additional policy conditions. Democrats, however, insist that any funding measure should also address priorities such as healthcare subsidies and social programs. The clash is familiar in American politics, but the stakes are high. If no compromise is reached, federal offices could close temporarily, hundreds of thousands of employees could face delayed paychecks, and critical services, from national parks to certain health and safety programs, would be disrupted. Markets could react with volatility, and public confidence in government could erode. Trump says that if a shutdown occurs, the blame will lie with Democrats, but he also expresses hope that it can be avoided. This reflects a classic budget showdown in Washington. Each side seeks leverage, while ordinary citizens bear the risk of real consequences. These three stories, Bagram, the UN, and the shutdown, may seem separate, but they are connected by a common thread. They reveal a vision of American policy that emphasizes strength, sovereignty, and domestic control. On the international stage, Trump's vow to retake Bagram signals a willingness to project U.S. power far beyond its borders, even at the risk of renewed conflict. His criticism of the UN shows skepticism toward multilateral cooperation and a preference for unilateral action. At home, the looming shutdown reflects deep divisions in Congress and a struggle over how America should spend its money and define its priorities. Domestic politics and foreign policy feed into each other. A government distracted or weakened by internal budget crises may find it harder to manage complex global challenges. So, what lessons can we draw? First, the decisions of major powers like the United States do not exist in isolation. A single statement about an airbase thousands of miles away can unsettle regional security and global diplomacy. Second, international institutions such as the United Nations matter, not because they are perfect, but because they provide a forum where nations can negotiate rather than fight. Weakening them carries risks for everyone. Third, economic and political stability at home is inseparable from influence abroad. Even a temporary government shutdown in Washington can send shockwaves through markets and international alliances. As we watch these developments unfold, it is important to remember that politics is dynamic. Today's headlines can change tomorrow. Trump's proposals are not yet policies, they are signals of where he wants the debate to go. For citizens everywhere, the challenge is to stay informed and to think critically. Whether you support or oppose these positions, understanding them is the first step toward meaningful dialogue. Thank you.